This is System Crash. I'm Paris Marks.
And I am Brian Merchant. This week on the show, the Donald Trump-Elon Musk feud continues into a second week as Musk seems to offer an olive branch, or attempt to, and protests in Los Angeles torch Waymos and Lime scooters as Trump ramps up an authoritarian clampdown.
Plus, Ohio State mandates AI use to make all its undergrads bilingual in AI. Video game performers have a tentative union agreement. Chinese tech companies are restricting AI tools during nationwide university exams, and so much more. This system has just begun to crash, so support the show by heading over to patreon.com/systemcrashpod, where you can sign up to get monthly bonus episodes. Also, rate the show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Now, Brian, I want to start by asking you about the big story of the week. And that is, of course, Apple's new icon design style. You know, this has been taking the world by storm. What do you make of the fact that our iPhones and our Macs are going to have a new design language? Talk about innovation, right?
You told me that you were going to make this joke at the top of the episode before, and I promised not to look up to see what Apple had actually done. And I'm holding good to this promise. I have no idea. I am proud to say that I have not absorbed a single thing coming out of WWDC, which is Apple's big developer conference, which I now know is going on. So you have to tell me.
To be fair, I don't think there was very much that came out of it. So,
like a font? Wait, what is it? What is it? Tell me what this is. What is this?
So to celebrate whatever this milestone is in iPhones, they have a new design language, I guess, that they're using across their OSs called Liquid Glass.
Oh, I saw this.
Yeah.
I saw where people are like, it's like the icons.
There's like a lot of transparency.
Yeah, you like pick your fort and then things scroll through it so that you always have, and you can always see them. And people are like, wow, this is really high tech, but it also just looks kind of wonky.
Yeah, it's like shiny and clear, and I don't know, like, is this really a big deal? Like, this is all Apple has to show off, is some new like icon and UI styles. Like, okay, that's great and all, but I think we're looking for more from Apple at the moment. You know, like all the commentators are like, where's Apple's AI Siri? Why is it not here yet? Like, personally, I do not care about the AI Siri. If that never comes, you know, that is perfectly fine by me. But like, can they really not figure out anything better than this? Like, what does Apple have coming up? Okay, a slimmer iPhone in the fall, apparently. A new Vision Pro or not so Pro headset next year, maybe. Like, everything just sounds so...
They're still talking about the Vision Pro. I was wondering if they would still talk about it at all, or if they just
I don't know if it's been announced, but like the rumors are that there's another... headset
model
coming next year sometime. Yeah, exactly. Like, they're still looking to iterate on it to bring something else out. They're still trying to do the smart glasses thing like Meta and Google are doing. But like, I don't know. I'm so bored. I'm so bored of everything. But, you know, I think it's fair to say that we've talked more than enough about Apple.
In a week where like there's true, this is like another one of those weeks already. Like, it's Wednesday, where I feel like in the U.S., maybe you all aren't feeling it as heatedly up there, but it feels like this is, you know, the Trump's got his military parade,
Right.
spending like $45 million or more to bring.
I forgot about the parade.
Well, and it's like, so that's been in the works to like this big show of force. And he's talking about how if there's any protesters, they're going to be met with heavy, heavy force, to quote Trump. And then there's what's been going on in Los Angeles, where I live. And it's so frustrating. It's so, I feel like wild to be in like the eye of this storm, because if you live in LA, then it's just immediately clear that what's going on is pageantry, right? Like, it's just, the Trump administration had these things that they wanted to do. They knew that if they were going to bring ICE raids to LA, which is a sanctuary city for migrants, that there would be protests, and that they could justify, you know, sort of bringing force into those protests, and then basically step back and sort of watch the fireworks and use that as a justification for all these things that they had clearly decided that they were going to do no matter what, right? So it's just like all the insanity of the Trump administration turned up to 11. Like, we have Dr. Phil going on ICE raids Fox News is around the clock, sort of like hyping up the need to sort of deploy the troops and for safety and for public safety. And it's just, it's so farcical because like I was down there, like, on the streets and downtown LA where all of this is happening. The area where there's conflict, where there's been some protests, is so tiny. Like most of LA is running 100% just going about its business. They have no idea. You can't even hear a tear gas canister being fired in parts of downtown LA even. It's just, but they're justifying all that, and they have all these, like, it's like they had the tweets pre-written and preloaded. JD Vance is like, we're just asking you to do your jobs. Do what? There's like 100 guys who are mad that you're deporting their parents and they're fighting for them. Of course they are. Good for them. It has been truly, truly wild to see. And of course, like, the part that has been a fixture of the media and that I've written about in my newsletter this week was the Waymo torchings, which has become like a flashpoint even between the sort of the neoliberal folks who are like, like, this is the wrong way to protest. Don't destroy property, maintain safety. And of course, the right is seizing on these as like the key images. Like Elon Musk tweeted the image of the guy in the mask on top of a burning Waymo. I mean, that you look, I mean, it's like that. It's pretty. I mean, the guy looks pretty badass. Like,
I love it. Yeah.
like, let's be honest. Like, you're tweeting that out. Like this guy waving a flag.
Did you see the video of the guys in like a Cybertruck that was all like done up to support the protest, like driving around, I think with like a Mexican flag at the window or something like that?
I did not see that.
Yeah.
No, I've seen most things.
But I feel like from abroad, like it's been really concerning to watch, right? And obviously we're getting one particular picture of it from what is coming out of the media because we're not there on the ground, right? And so I feel like it's hard for me to really comment in a way like you can, having not actually been there and seen what's going on. But I feel like maybe 2 points based on what you were just saying there is, on the one hand, like I feel like there was all this kind of hand wringing about the Waymos, and I saw on one side of this that people were basically calling the Waymos so that they could get them in a strategic area and then light them on fire basically. But I feel like it also can serve as a symbol and as like an education point as well, right? Beyond just the self-driving taxis, because something that 404 Media reported on not too long ago was on how the Waymos and how police are basically essentially getting video footage from not just the Waymos, but these other robotaxi and self-driving vehicle services whenever they need them, basically, right? It's something that they're increasingly turning to because we know that these vehicles are, they have cameras all around them. They're tracking everything that goes on around them. So it's like a new form of surveillance going around the cities that can aid in these types of enforcement actions or whatever you want to call them, right?
And protesters know this, right? So like people know this. So I went down there to try to get to the bottom of this question, right? Like why the Waymos were hailed. Were they in the wrong place at the wrong time? Was this a coordinated demonstration? There are some factions that think that this was like an op. It was like but done by agent provocateurs who like to make the protesters look bad or whatever. What I heard talking to eyewitnesses and journalists and some activists who were there was that people were calling them spy cars because they're aware of their facility in obtaining surveillance data and the fact that that police departments in a growing number of not just LA but across the country where they operate, they're and Google is complying. They say that they wait for a court order or a subpoena, but Google is handing over the data. So there's already, this well-known sense that they're acting sort of as potential, vessels of surveillance on behalf of the state. And so that already sort of endears them to no one. And then, there's the fact that whether or not it's 100% logical, one of the through lines of this new administration and the new sort of formation of Silicon Valley and the White House and this tightening alliance between the two is that there is just, closer interplay between big tech and Trump and Team Trump and what they wanted to do. So, there's an activist that was quoted in a New York Times piece who I didn't speak to, but who, sort of underlined that like there's this broad sense that, Waymo may not be a direct sort of vessel being operated by the National Guard, which has been called in to LA, of course. There's National Guard and now maybe Marines, and there's Predator drones and Waymos like sort of circling around, and Google cut off the service to downtown LA. And I was able to confirm that too, that you can't get them to go down in LA. But yeah, sure enough, you go down there and there's like five husks of cars, and it's crazy how burned I mean, they clearly, I think it would be difficult to move away, otherwise they may have been removed by the time that I got there the next day, but, like, they're just, like, heap of ashes and, like, a chassis and some wheel frames. We'll throw the link to my post in the show notes, but it was like, wow, like, you would not be able to tell that these were Waymos, if you didn't already know, but they were importantly lined up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row. My sense is that this was like, a not predetermined in like we planned this for years and years, but maybe they realized after seeing some Waymos around, they could make this statement and draw from, a lot of that ambient anger at what big tech's doing. Google has contracted with ICE through third-party vendors. Google has donated to Trump's inauguration, and, Sundar has been in the White House. So it's true that, that there is a degree of connection there that I think people are right to be angry about. You throw in the surveillance piece and, there is a lot of just kind of animosity towards these things. Lime scooters, where two people were throwing lime scooters onto the pyres of the flaming Google cars, and they were also gathering over underpasses where a bunch of police cars and ICE vehicles had gathered, and they were chucking lime scooters down at them.
I saw a photo just the other day of a bunch of protesters in Paris that had like zip tied lime scooters and bikes together to like form a barricade. And it was like, oh, the barricade of the 21st century is
Exactly. The apparatus is a big tech. And that's the point I'm so like the funny thing is like the reason that, the tech companies like these things, right? Because they're automated, they automate the process, they remove labor from the equation, but they also remove, accountability, right? They remove the need for there to be like a person sort of, facilitating the rental of these scooters. It's done by an app. The app teaches you to like, you have to charge it up, you, the user, and they'll pay you a buck or two. But they're these accountability sinks. And we don't, Google won't share what's actually in the Waymo algorithm. So like they just keep saying it's safer than anything. It's the safest car. It's a safe driver. So nothing is going to be a human's fault, or nothing's going to be Google's fault either. It's going to be out of their hands because it's just like a seamless state-of-the-art algorithm. And yet the protesters are turning that on its head, right? They're sort of weaponizing that lack of accountability. They're weaponizing that accountability sink and saying like, okay, there's no one here who's like watching these cars, or to say maybe I shouldn't like drive my $200,000 Jaguar into a police barricade where there's like people with munitions and things like that. And like they just line them up 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they make a show of torching
I
them.
love it. I thought it was such a perfect image to come out of it. Obviously, there's a whole load of other things going on. This is, a piece of the protest that
This
is
is
kind
just a
of
small piece.
exactly
Yeah,
that
I
is
mean,
related to, the types of issues that we talk about on the show.
right.
But I feel like it helps to identify and educate people about what these tools really are. And as you're talking about that, like it really makes you think about the distance that we go from going from, the local taxi service that is rooted in the community to the ride hailing service that is one further step removed from that, to then the robo taxi service that is unlikely to have any humans in there. It might have some remote drivers. You're not really interacting with someone. And, again, it's this like further, it's like a national service that is run by this large multinational company that really has no like relationship to what is going on locally.
Right? Like we've gone in a few steps from having, a local taxi company where somebody who knows the streets can offer some local color, maybe it's part of a taxi union. I mean, obviously, we don't want to glamorize, taxi cartels because, like, obviously, these workers are often exploited as well and owned by companies that extract value from renting medallions and so on and so forth. But
Okay, Travis Kalanick, geez, yeah.
yeah. But that's a good point because then next you go to Uber where you hollow out like the local business element and you still have, local workers driving for Uber. They're even more precarious. They're even more at the whims of an algorithm. They might not, know that because they don't have to. A lot you used to have to pass taxi tests to know the streets and all that, and so now you can just go where the algorithm tells you. But it's still, somebody who lives in the city and you're talking to a human. And now Waymo has removed even that, where you're just getting into a sort of a screen-filled autonomous vehicle experience where you're just like looking at screens getting ported from one place to another, and when the profits materialize, they get shipped completely out of the local economy and up to a Silicon Valley giant. And I think that isn't necessarily sort of, on the tip of everybody's tongues, but like when you start thinking about it for a second, and same with Lime, right? Like, these are companies that operate with like the bare minimum level of accountability in a community. They just set up the scooters, sort of say like, hey, we'll pay people a few bucks to charge them. We'll pay people a few bucks to put them in the right place, and then you can pay to rent them. And the rest is, the city's problem. And so they're scattered in people's way. There's like and once again, like this is a company that's not of the community. Their tech products sort of parachuted into the community, irregardless of any existing social relationships and structures. And so to see them get challenged, I mean, it kind of intuitively it makes sense, right? That they're become the source of ire and backlash, in particular, given the extra sort of elements of surveillance and their potential to, actually act on behalf of the state that people are protesting against.
No, definitely. And if I was to kind of zoom us out even from the Waymo piece of this, I think seeing what has been happening on the streets of LA, not having been there, watching from afar, it does seem to be a very concerning, very worrying escalation of the types of things that Trump has been talking about and doing, where we see not just the ICE raids and then, kind of leveling that up with the National Guard being deployed without the kind of authorization of the governor of California. But we really do see, as you were talking about earlier, this desire to really crack down, the talk about this kind of, spreading to other places, right on the verge of Trump doing his big kind of birthday military parade, because this parade just happens to be within a few days of Trump's actual birthday, so he can celebrate himself as well. But like all of this happens, and then one thing that really struck me that you said earlier was like Dr. Phil was like with ICE on these raids. Like it just feels like it speaks to the moment that America is in, that like now the reality TV guys are like going with the far right immigration thugs for like the program. Like it's just I don't know, it's
Yeah.
so wild to wrap
And
your head
Fox
around.
News host, former Fox News host Pete Hegseth is, delivering these blustery press conferences. He's the one activating the National Guard. And meanwhile, like the opposition, like so Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, he's been a little bit better than on this than I thought. But I mean, he does love to sort of, make a show of being the resistance figure.
Oh,
But
does he ever? Yeah.
Dr. Phil was just on his podcast. Dr. Phil was on his, like, Gavin Newsom has been having this podcast with these like right-wing
Yeah,
figures.
where he talks about being against trans people in sports and all this kind of stuff.
Right. Sits down with Charlie Kirk.
Yeah.
Some real nasty guys. But also it's just like it's more just like so stupid. This political intuition that, the Democrats lost because they weren't mean enough to trans people. They weren't mean enough to immigrants, that they have to be more like it's so depressing to see that be the line that comes out of like this thoroughly discredited, by the way, consultant class that botched the last election, and they're still holding on to power apparently and still making these same prescriptions. But yeah, anyways, it is like all the way down. There's just so many catastrophes and mini catastrophes and crisis in full swing here. And on top of it all, there's still Elon Musk.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I'm sure by the time this airs, what has happened in LA, the story will escalate. And that really goes into, the Trump Musk feud because we recorded last Wednesday for people who weren't aware, who might have listened to last week's episode. Then, of course, there was this huge fight.
Yeah, we were hearing from people. Not only that, but we were like, I don't know, like maybe they'll probably still, be partners and
And then it was like, we were texting about it, and you were like, should we like record something to put in the introduction to be like, hey, we
and you're
recorded
like,
this on
no.
Wednesday. Yeah, I was like, we addressed this next
No,
week.
not
Yeah. So, if people were listening to last week's episode and we're
this
a
is
bit
a podcast,
confused,
not 60 minutes. All right. Yeah.
yeah, we're a bit confused about the takes that we might have had. That was because, it was all recorded before these two men had their big blow up. I think one of the interesting things there was, okay, yeah, on the one hand, these two narcissists finally go head to head, finally can't stand each other anymore. It feels to me like this is really something that is prompted by Elon Musk because Elon had to keep coming out and criticize the budget bill and all this kind of stuff. And it feels like in part that is driven by, the fact that his companies and things are starting to feel the pressure of his association with the Trump administration, and he needs to try to do something to rescue that. So he is trying to distance himself, and then he goes, basically a few steps too far to the point where Trump finally shoots back at him, and they have, this kind of afternoon of going back and forth at one another. And then, of course, we can talk about some of the stories that came out after that, to the point that this relationship looks like it is in tatters. And then, as we're speaking again on a Wednesday, Elon Musk has put out a tweet saying that he regrets some of the things that he tweeted about Donald Trump last week.
I went too far.
Yeah.
And everybody's calling him a cuck. It's great. Yeah.
Well, not wrong, like.
Oh, it's pathetic.
Because he also deleted a lot of the tweets that he made last week as well. In particular, the one
Epstein tweet, like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like everyone was losing, but Elon Musk tweeted that the reason the Epstein files were not released is because Donald Trump is in them. And everyone was like, oh my God, he said it. He knew this stuff. And I was kind of like, didn't we all sort of know this already? Like,
everybody kind of knew that.
Yeah. Is this really news?
Yeah. There was a lot of footage of them like buddying around together. Yeah. No, great stuff. Really, really great stuff. It was. I mean, you talk about like events that neatly encapsulate or reflect like our times TM. Like that's one of them where like a whole day's news cycle is the richest man in the world and the president of the United States tweeting at each other.
No, one is Xing and the other one is truthing. So,
truth socialing. Yeah. What do they call it? Are they just truthing? You post your truths?
I think it's a truth. Yeah. And then you retruth when you, reshare or whatever. Yeah.
Truth Social is for all intents and purposes just like a blog. Like it's just like Donald Trump's blog.
Yeah.
There's like that. This may be obscure to younger listeners, but there's like that Office episode where like the intern sets up like a word page because Creed, one of the characters who's just like deranged, wants to set up a blog, so he just like opens a Word document that he can like type his thoughts into. Like that's what I feel like Donald Trump's Truth Social is. It's just like, and then people screen grab it and then like move it over there. Like nobody's like, it doesn't do anything on the actual platform.
Did you ever see that video of him? I think it was during, I guess, one of the Democratic leadership debates maybe, or something like that. And he's kind of like sitting next to his social media person. And like when he has a thought that he wants to tweet out, he's like, okay, write this and, put this in capitalization and blah, blah, blah. And they're writing it out and then checking over to see if it looks right. And they're like, does this look good, Donald? He's like, yeah. Okay,
putting in all caps.
Yeah.
3 exclamation points.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Really funny. But like the meat of it is, I'm sure everybody's seen it by now, but it got feisty pretty quickly. Donald Trump. I think the big takeaways are it started because of like simmering resentments for a long time. And unless anything changes dramatically, if things, which they totally can, if it continues along this path, then I think, like what we said last week, I think I'm going to stick with it that like Elon is like the big loser out of this whole thing. he's the big, like, yeah, he got out of some regulations, and he's in position to get some, government contracts. And it does seem like being the richest man in the world is like the one thing that Trump will forgive somebody for. But like, yeah, he looks like a moron. He's torched a lot of his reputation. I mean, critics and people, like us, were well aware of the ins and outs of his businesses. But now, like, millions of people have seen what a loser he is up front and center. It's tarnished the brand of his products in Europe and in, a lot of markets in the United States and Canada. So of course he's the one who has to grovel and start coming back, in part because Trump threatened to cancel his SpaceX contracts. So yeah, so like the takeaway, I think like what's come out is like it was Elon Musk had submitted his buddy to be the head of NASA, but it turned out that he had donated to Democrats. They'd gotten in this fist fight probably with Musk and Besant. People are kind of fed up with him just as a presence in the White House because he's so annoying, making bad jokes. And then Trump kind of torpedoes this nomination. And I feel like, honestly, I think Elon's just a big baby, and it just all got to him. He's like, my shareholders are yelling at me. People are, punching me in the White House because I'm such a loser. And then now even Donald Trump like doesn't have my back, and he's gonna torpedo this guy that I nominated, despite everything that I've done with Doge, and despite like all the money that I've given you. So I'm sure it just all sort of just like curdled. It was like he went rage posting. Those of us who've done that before can at least sympathize with where you just like, I should not be posting this, like just like
Who knows what he was on at the time as well.
Yeah, sure. I'm sure he's like on 2 hours of sleep and like, who knows
Well,
how
I meant
many
the drugs,
milligrams
not the
of
sleep,
ketamine.
but yeah.
Yeah, sleep deprived and in a K-hole, like, just like tweeting away. Perhaps there's a good chance per previous reportage.
I feel like I'm not as conclusive on like Elon's the big loser here.
Yeah.
I think his reputation is definitely harmed from his association with Donald Trump. But as we were talking about last week, the media was already kind of ready and willing to take him back into the fold. At least some of the liberal media and the Democrats were talking about, maybe wanting to work with him again. And of course, when he started tweeting out all this stuff about Donald Trump, they were immediately like, oh, this is bad for Trump's reputation. Like, they were ready to eat it all up, right? And then the other piece of it is, okay, Elon Musk is on the outs with Trump right now. We will see if that continues or if there is some mending of the fences in a few weeks after, emotions have simmered down a little bit. I'm still open to saying that I think that could happen. I don't think that this is necessarily done and dusted.
100%. I agree.
But the other piece of this is Jared Isaacman will not be heading up NASA. We know that. But Elon Musk's people, and not just like the Doge boys, but like influential people from his companies are still embedded in many different parts of the US government, not just Doge, but other organizations as well. And they will still have influence there, and they will still have his ear and things like that as they are going about their duties. So I think that he still has influence and authority. He still has kind of, fingers in the US government in a way that I think some of the reporting would suggest like, oh, he's completely out the door now. He's out in the cold. I still don't think that's the case. Yeah.
No, yeah, I think that's right. I think he could come back, but I do, but
it's like he doesn't even need to come back, right?
I mean, it's all relative.
Like the relationship between Trump and Musk does not actually need to mend for Musk to still have a lot of influence over the US government in its current state. That is my view of things. Obviously, he wants to make sure that he's not going to lose SpaceX contracts, that, his attempt to embed Starlink in so many different parts of the US government is not going to be rolled back now that he's not there and not in the influential position that he was in. But I think that even though they might want to change some of those things, the reality is, and this is the case with many other governments beyond the United States, that there isn't a reasonable alternative right now for many of these things. So like you need to rely on SpaceX or you're just not going to space in many cases, right?
Yeah.
I saw Tim Fernholz, who's a space reporter, kind of quote post one of these posts that had referred to Musk's tweet about saying that he regretted posting these things about Trump, to be like, oh, Musk realized he needs permission to fire off the Starship rockets, and he's gonna need a good relationship with Trump in order to keep the Starship program going basically. And we know that that is a program that has had its difficulties. So like, I don't think Musk is out of the water. I think that his companies are still in a very difficult state. I think that he is clearly going to try to restore his reputation based on, this kind of little war with Donald Trump. And my hope is that obviously the media and other people who are watching who, are just regular people are not going to let him get away with it, because he regrets tweeting mean stuff about Donald Trump or certain mean things about Donald Trump. He does not regret cutting off food for millions of people. He does not regret cutting off medicine for a ton of people. And we talked about this last week, and all the people who have been affected, who have contracted HIV, who have died because of the decisions that he and the organization that he led made. He does not regret those things.
No.
And so, I don't think that he should be given a pass for all of that.
No, certainly not. I guess the way that I would put it is that because he's Elon Musk and like he obviously could not help but do these very stupid things, I think there's going to be a lot of, a power base that's been installed that is still, that he can still draw from. Like he said, like it doesn't really affect some of his contracts, but it might affect some other ones. And it certainly like impedes his ability to sort of wield influence in a lot of rooms. In my previous newsletter, I wrote about how, like, by and large, like, Musk already did the dirty work with Doge. He got it all set up. And we've already seen that, like, Russ Vought, the Project 2025 author, since we recorded, he's continued to slide in. And it seemed like all the reports are basically that he's just kind of, taking over a lot of the operations of Doge because it's a lot of stuff that he wanted to do anyways. And now Musk doesn't really need to be a point of contact.
I kind of wondered like what you made about that, right? Because we talked about this last week, right? This Wired story that was saying that even though Musk is gone, Doge is like doubling down, continuing its work, continuing to expand into other departments, all this kind of stuff. But then there was this other report in the past few days basically saying that the Trump administration realized that in certain cases, Doge fired too many people, like in the weather service and things like that, and need to bring people back.
Yeah.
So I wonder what you make of, where you think this is going on the Doge front.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say, and it's like really a political matter in a lot of ways now, I think, because Musk did install a lot of sort of his lackeys and confidants. Thomas Shedd, famously, who was, put in charge of the GSA and who was running a lot of the Doge operations. There's a president of Doge in name, but she's like never actually mentioned in any of these stories or in any on the ground. She might as well not be involved. But so, yeah, it'll be really interesting to see like whether or not, Trump. Remember, there's like all these internal politics too. Like Russ Vought is really this Project 2025 guy who like really did have all of these things that he wanted to accomplish that maybe Trump did or didn't really give that much of a shit about. But since he's handed over sort of the operations of his administration to a lot of these guys, they're happening. And Doge is carrying out one of the key planks of one of those policy areas, which is just they wanted to fire a bunch of public servants and replace them with loyalists. And so Musk got that ball rolling. So I don't know how much more appetite Trump will have for it if it continues to generate bad headlines, or he may have kind of lost interest in it. It's not really generating the dollar signs in cuts that he might have hoped to see, because they're just firing people. I mean, if you want to cut serious money, you have to cut the big government contracts, and then
cut the defense budget, maybe. Like
cut the defense budget, maybe. Which, I mean, we'll see. One of the headlines last week was that Russ Vought was actually going to do. We'll see. Like usually you aim your cost cutting at the blob, and it's just that it bounces right off. But yeah, I think it's going to be really political. I think it's a matter of how many of these Doge guys who are working in Silicon Valley beforehand, want to keep doing it now that Musk's not involved, now that like kind of the party is over. If you're like a 20-something, guy who calls himself Big Balls, like, after all the headlines for 6 months of, causing misery and Musk tweeting about you and everybody cheering you on, that's fun for you maybe if you're a little shit. But another 6 months of that and years, like you probably want to get back to your crypto startup or whatever, So I don't know. It really depends on a lot of things to me. Like, I think the Silicon Valley contingent maybe kind of loses interest and kind of falls away from Doge. Russ Vought installs his own lackeys maybe it becomes easier to resist then as a result, or maybe not because it's not making headlines as we talked about last week. So yeah, I think it's a mixed bag, but I think the biggest thing is that Trump isn't probably all that into it right now. He's into getting tanks to roll down Pennsylvania Avenue. That's what interests him right now.
Yeah, I feel like for me, there will be some of these Silicon Valley guys who might not want to stick it out or keep it going, but I feel like a lot of them have also embraced this right-wing project at this point. And so, they might be ideologically motivated to stick around, or they might have promises that if they stick around a bit longer, then they'll get a certain position or something on the other end of it. We'll see if that gets followed through on.
Yeah, I would love to see reporting on, like, really drill down, like, what's the composition of the Doge team now? Like, how has it changed since Musk has gone nuclear? And where are we at now? And is it being replaced by weird Project 2025 guys and friends of Russ Vought? Yeah, I think those are all the key questions.
Yeah. Well, this is obviously a story that we'll be, watching, following up on to see how this continues to develop. But I feel like at this point, we should probably just get to our final stories of the week and round off the episode. What do you think?
Final stories.
All right, you start us off.
What if I start doing that to announce our final stories section? I think listeners would like that.
Yeah, I'm sure they would love it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, and the headphones.
They're craving it.
Somebody just starts bellowing. Yeah, I could try it down a notch.
Robin will just boost the volume on that piece of it too, so it gets really loud. Yeah.
Make it painful for them. You just want to keep you awake. Yeah, this is important stuff. You gotta know it all. Awake, as we should add, as we are not. Both Paris and I are on like 3 hours of sleep apiece. So if we veered off into any subjects that were not anchored in reality for any point of time, it's a shared hallucination that we have. Right, Paris?
Happy that's on the record. Yeah, great.
Wow. Rude. First, you don't like my final voices bellowing? I was so excited to try it out. I workshopped it for days and days until I got it just right. And then I said, you know what? This is going to be a little surprise for Paris. He's going to love this.
How do we know that wasn't actually me saying that in your voice, as we know?
That's true. Yeah. Oh, Robin might not even know about the conspiracy theory, which is that, Robin, our new producer, is that there's a fan theory that I don't exist, that I am actually just Paris doing a voice.
I co-host this show with myself. Yeah.
Just talking to himself for co-hosting it. Which it was surfaced in the Tech Won't Say. So these are like your fans who are having this theory of you. Yeah.
These are my people. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay. How about you start with our first story now?
All right. Yeah. So our first story is, this is just such a good one. It's that Ohio State, a large university in the United States of America, is going all in on AI. I am quoting it here, so this is not how I would phrase it, but they want to make all their undergrads, quote, bilingual, fluent both in their respective majors and in artificial intelligence, as Axios reports. This is incredibly depressing. I think we saw a similar initiative get installed in California and some of the Cal State systems, but it's not as aggressive as this. Like, students are expected to use generative AI. They're expected to go to workshops, use it in their course studies, day in, day out, from their first days as a freshman through when they graduate as a senior. And this, right as we're seeing a lot of the effects of generative AI coming in, the rampant cheating, the plagiarizing, the ill effects of the cognitive offloading that AI instructs you to undergo, where you're not learning things, you're just having them automatically generated. So yeah, it's just it's just a disaster. This is not the first we've seen, but it's the worst.
Yeah, it's a terrible story. Of course, when you first said to me that they were making their students bilingual in AI, I was thinking about how bilingualism in the United States means such a different thing than up here in Canada, where it means speaking English and French. Down there, apparently it's English and AI, which is, I don't know, grim.
Yeah, I know. We've given up on teaching our like Spanish in the public school system.
Who needs languages when the AI knows them all for you, Yeah.
That's right. You can auto-generate it. But you joke. that's pretty much it in a nutshell. That's the new logic that is animating this brave new world.
Totally. I feel like a good contrast to that is what's happening in China right now, where rather than, pushing all these AI functions on the students, Alibaba and Tencent are actually limiting certain features in their generative AI tools right now because China is undergoing or is about to start the nationwide university entry exams, which are really competitive as all these students are trying to get places at the big universities in China. And so to prevent cheating and to make sure that students are actually learning the material and doing this properly, the generative AI systems are actually being restricted. And I was like, man, this would never happen over in this part of the world. The tech companies would never go for it. The governments would never even try it. You'd have a bunch of people in the States losing their minds about freedom of speech or some bullshit like that. But I don't know. It makes sense to me.
We're all in over here. It's more. Okay, and some good news for once. The video game actors' strike may be over soon, as The Verge reports. A tentative deal has been struck between the Screen Actor Guild members with the major video game companies that could end an 11-month-long strike. And the holdout issue, of course, was protections over AI for the voice workers. So it seems like finally the two sides are close enough to agree on some worker protections for AI. This has been, the sticking point, obviously. AI is viewed as an existential threat to voice acting, given that startups like 11 Labs and OpenAI and its voice product can now generate voices on demand. The union was hoping to get some protections that the gaming companies would not use AI to replace work. So we shall have to see, but it's promising news in a struggle that has been ongoing. So a tentative congratulations to the SAG-AFTRA workers.
Yeah, no, it's definitely great news. And there were certainly questions as to whether they were going to be able to get a proper agreement. And so it's good to see them, get to this point.
Because a long time the video game companies were saying, we're just not going to do it.
Exactly.
You're not getting anything.
Yeah. And back to the bad AI news, Meta is apparently planning up to a $15 billion investment into Scale AI to gain a 49% share as it makes a big push to build out its own super intelligence team, because it can't just release its open source models and, release all these different tools and push them on users through its different platforms. Now it needs to pretend that it's also going to build the AGI and all this kind of stuff at the same time as Sam Altman is saying, once again, that AGI is basically going to arrive next year. Don't worry about it. It's definitely happening, which makes me think of Elon Musk saying for a decade that, self-driving cars are right around the corner. Sure thing, man, whatever you say, but we don't need to take this seriously.
Yeah, it really is starting because now it's every time Sam Altman publishes one of these little blog posts that's it has begun, humanity has entered its next era. I'm just okay, what's the deal he's got on the table? How much is he trying to raise? There's always something. The last one was the SoftBank deal that they got $40 billion on paper. It's really going to be a lot less than that. But I agree with you 100%. And I don't honestly, how do you not read this and not get that impression at this point? Every 6 months, there's a new little post that says we're transcending, our mortal coils. The age of superintelligence is upon us. And meanwhile, it's, college students using ChatGPT to cheat on their homework.
But not in China.
So, oh, well, yeah. And the Scale AI thing is really interesting, too, because it's Scale AI is an interesting company. Maybe we'll drill more into that company soon, because it's also a big labor supplier. That was what it's started with, is linking up the AI companies with data sets that have been cleaned and hiring workers to sort of clean the content that would go into the data sets and make sure that it was usable. So they provide sort of all of that stuff that will allow the AI companies to scale. It's mentioned in Karen Howe's book. So yeah, that hasn't really been discussed much. The fact that there's all these labor issues with this acquisition, it just really seems to me that Zuckerberg's just kind of once again just going like, more AI. Like, and they already have a huge name in the AI field, Jan LeCun, and I think it warrants mentioning that he has been out there saying that like we're not getting HEI this way. Like he's one of the few guys who's like working at one of these big companies saying like you can't just do it this way. You can't scale and scale and scale, which is all that OpenAI and the big ones are doing. So Mark Zuckerberg is just like, no, like we'll just like sideline you, and we're gonna have a new super intelligence initiative. We're doing it anyways. We're bringing in a bunch of guys. So it's just more mess as usual.
Mark Zuckerberg's going to send his masculine, burly man to go after Jan LeCun now and disappear him so he can't keep saying those things. But I guess final story of the week. Remember last month or 6 weeks ago or whatever, we were talking about Canada as the election was wrapping up. And of course, I was talking about how Mark Carney was, really big on AI. Well, he's been talking a lot about it lately. And there's this
Canadian Prime Minister.
Yeah, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. Sorry, we just recognize that that's who he is up here, of course. But the AI minister, because Canada now has a minister of artificial intelligence and innovation or something like that.
Canada being the country that is located to the north of the United States.
Yes, thank you. Above the 49th parallel, I believe, something like that. Yeah, is where it is. So Canada's AI minister came out this week and said that the government will not be, quote, over-indexing on warnings and regulation when it comes to artificial intelligence and will be promoting business adoption of AI, which sounds absolutely terrible and gives you an idea of where we're going.
Just sounds like it was written by an AI guy. Over-indexing, that's just the language that they use. We're not going to over-index on regulation, man.
Totally. Why would we do that? Why would we learn from the consequences of not regulating all these other technologies and just letting AI go wild because we want, to maximize the potential of the short-term economic gain and not think about what could come out of that on the other side?
Don't want to over-index. Did you watch Mountainhead?
I did, yeah.
Well, we're not going to get in. We're going to do our bonus episode, I think, on Mountainhead because, I have so many thoughts.
Yeah, that works.
Quickly, thumbs up or thumbs down?
Thumbs in the middle.
Thumbs in the middle. Okay. Well, we'll dive into. I actually have a thumb. I was surprised. I am not a huge Succession fan, so I was going in with somewhat low expectations, but we'll talk about why on our bonus episode this month. But I'm going to make the case for a pretty enthusiastic thumbs up for it for a few reasons.
All right. Well, there's the preview. I think that's it for us this week. System Crash is hosted by Paris Marks and Brian Merchant. Production is by Robin Simon. Our theme music is Dystopia by our good friends in Yacht. Support the show on patreon.com/systemcrashpod to get a monthly bonus episode. Thanks for listening. Bye.